Alright, hello and welcome to this overview of patch 0.7.8. Now, 0.7.8 came out yesterday. Normally I like to cover these on the same day, but they released the patch notes at the same exact time as the game. So we actually spent the entire day streaming the game and not getting to the patch notes. Also, they're very extensive. It seems like every patch, the notes get bigger and bigger, the changes get bigger and bigger in the actual patch. And this one's huge, so instead of trying to cover every detail or even most of the details in this patch, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do like my top 25, the 25 things that people are most likely to care about in this patch. There's a hell of a lot more in here, so if you're someone who wants to know all of the details, I definitely recommend going through it. I went over everything on stream. It took me over an hour to cover it, so that's just how big it is, and I don't think an hour-long video is the best idea. So we're just going to do the top 25 here. As always, these patch notes for me are raw. I don't cut them, so please forgive me for any mistakes I might make. You're gonna get me as I normally am on stream on these videos. All right, well, with that, let's get into it. We'll start with the very first thing, maybe the biggest thing. There's a lot of big things. It's really hard to say. The new campaign chapter, Chapter 8, has been released. I haven't even gotten to it yet. So I can't tell you anything about it other than it's Lagan, the god of storms, and the moon is the deity. There's a bunch of new enemies, there's a bunch of new areas, of course, a new story. That should be pretty cool. Number 2 is an arena scaling change. This one's really, really significant. They've done things like this in the past, but not to this extent. So the arena now scales up 3 times faster, or 3 times as fast, after wave 150. So what used to be wave 200 as far as difficulty goes is now the same as wave 300, and wave 433 is equivalent to wave 1000 before. Hopefully this means people won't be pushing 1,000 plus waves anymore, because that's terrible. It's like 8 hours to do that, and nobody really wants to do that. Even the people who push that, I think, would much rather reach their cap a lot sooner than 8 hours. So hopefully that change makes a big difference for players who are pushing really far in the arena. All right, next, also arguably the biggest one, depending on how you look at it, is the new stash. The stash is incredible. If you've been watching my streams, you know that the stash is something that I've been really, let's say, looking forward to. It's been a while coming. We've had really low stash space for some time. No longer. Now we can have up to 200 stash tabs. Will you get there? Probably never. You'll probably never get to that many, but I've already more than doubled my stash space. And the sorting system that they use in this, in the new stash tab, the way that you can divide it into like subgroups and color code it and add icons, it's amazing. It's really, it's probably the best stash system I've ever seen. Really, really incredible. Definitely get your hands on it, play around with it. It's so much fun. Next up, game guide. They've added a game guide. This is going to be especially useful for new players, but also for veterans. It has calculations for damage, it has calculations for mitigation, it has a lot of things like that. It's not fully fleshed out. There are still a lot of things to add to it, but a lot of the basic stuff is already in there, so definitely check that out as well. Okay, now let's move on to new skills. There are 3 new skills in the game. Death Seal, Spirit Plague, and Ice Barrage. Death Seal and Spirit Plague are for Acolytes. Ice Barrage is for Mage. I haven't played with Death Seal or Spirit Plague, although I've seen Spirit Plague being played. Dak Lags was playing it last night. Looked like a lot of fun. I have played with Ice Barrage, and let me tell you, I'm gonna be playing that for like 8 hours today on stream. It's so much fun. It's such a cool skill. It actually synergizes well with other damage abilities. So I've been using Ice Barrage with Lightning Blast. We're really having a good time with it. The skill tree is excellent. It looks amazing. It looks like there's a lot of different options. So definitely try these skills out if you're someone who likes to mess around with new skill trees. Even if you don't, like if you're like mages or acolytes, these are really cool skills. Okay, let's see. Anything about the passive system? Yeah, there's actually a lot about the passive. So the passive system has changed a lot. This is bad for my build guides, but you know, so be it. They've added another 2 tiers to the base class. And now you don't unlock the Mastery class passives until you unlock your Mastery class, which happens once you reach the end of time and do the Mastery class quest. So you'll only be able to put in the base class until you get to that point. You can, of course, take points back out of it. You only still need 20 points total in your base class to use the Mastery classes, so that hasn't changed. But you'll probably not get to the end of time until after you've got more than 20 points in. It's up to you whether you want to hoard those or you want to put them into some of the new stuff in the new base class. Some of that stuff is really good, so it might be worth it anyway. But that's a big change overall. New passives, and you won't get your mastery stuff as quickly, so just bear that in mind when you create a new character. Okay, channeled abilities have changed really substantially, actually. So channeled abilities no longer apply a mana drain, instead have a mana cost per second, which is affected by modifiers to mana cost. So it's easier to cut down the cost of this drain, so to speak, as mana per second now, as it's called. You can get a lot lower than you could before. You really couldn't affect it much at all. The downside is it no longer mana regen when you are channeling. So that's a really big downside. It's going to be interesting to see how this affects a lot of builds. I messed around with it a little bit, like 5 minutes on Warpath, and it's like, oh god, I can't actually keep this up forever because eventually I'm going to run out of mana just by running Warpath and then using other abilities. So we'll see how that actually plays out, how people like it. Currently, I'm not super digging it, but again, it's really early. We'll see how it goes. Okay, skill experience has changed, particularly, well, this is about your active skills. So your skills now gain experience faster at higher character levels. So it's up to 91. I think it starts around level 80. You start getting higher. But skills require more experience to reach high levels. So what's going to happen is early in the game, it's going to be harder for you to reach level 20, but then 80 or after, you'll be very quickly leveling up any new skills you want to try out. This is good for theory crafters, and it also probably is going to slow the game down a little bit and make the early game a little bit harder than it was before, because you won't have as many points invested in your skills. Let's see, class-specific headgear, body armor, and affixes. That's going to be down here. So this is another really big change. So what they've done is they've added class-specific helmets, class-specific body armor. So now you won't have just universal versions of those, unlike the boots and the gloves and things like basically everything else. Just the body armor and the helmets are like this. And they have specific stats to those classes, and they also have specific affixes that can be put on them that are class specifics. Like mage has particular affixes that only a mage can get, and primalist, and so on and so forth. This is a pretty substantial change. It's going to change a lot in how we do itemization on these particular pieces of gear, also for farming. So if you want to farm sentinel gear, you're probably going to want to do it with a sentinel. It used to be where if you wanted to get a chest piece, they were all universal, so you could farm on whatever character you wanted to. It's not so easy now. The same thing with the affixes, because the affixes only drop on those particular items. So just keep all this in mind when you're considering how you're going to farm, when you're considering making your character. There's over 100, I think, new affixes in the game, and most of them are class specific, and every class now has 8 new body armors and 8 new helmets that have their own specific types of stats on them that only they can wear. So big difference there. All right, let's see. We just covered the class-specific stuff. So 3 new uniques have been added. There's the affixes. Let's get down all the way to the uniques. Wow, that's quite a ways down. All right, so we've got the Celeron Step, the Ashen Crown, and the Shroud of Obscurity. This is an Acolyte specific. This is a Mage specific. Oops. And this one is just a general anyone. So these are the first specific uniques we've seen as well. So keep that in mind. We're now seeing a very small number of specific uniques go into the game. They're class-specific uniques. So some things are changing here. Some things are definitely changing. If you want to check out these particular uniques and the affixes and the new body armor, you can go over to Last Epoch Tools. It's all been updated. Dammit has done a great job. Dammit is the creator of Last Epoch Tools, of getting that updated very quickly. So it's all available for you to check out if you want to. Let's see, Plague Bearers got nerfed. Plague Bearers got nerfed pretty hard. Did I skip something here? Let's see, skill, class, 3 uniques, Plague Bearers nerf. Oh, it's in here. Here it is. Okay, so Plague Bearers is now a gate staff rather than composite staff. This may not sound like a big deal, but the composite staff got up to, I believe, 200% damage over time on it, whereas the gate staff has no damage over time increase. So that's a pretty big nerf. I don't know if I put it on here or not, but also along with that, poison is now 7% stacking buff instead of 8%. Minor nerf, but it might make a difference. I think this is going to make a bigger one, though. This is a pretty substantial deal. So poison, maybe not quite as good as it was. Also, Urzel's Pride got heavy nerfed, like really heavy. So Urzel's Pride, if you don't know, is a chess piece that a lot of Sentinels were using to get more mana regen, because Sentinels didn't have very good mana regen options. So it used to be 1% increased mana regen per 100 armor, which sounds like not much, but you could get like 20,000 armor with Sentinel. So you get huge amounts of mana regen. Well, they changed that from armor to lightning protection. Lightning protection is not very easily stacked, let's just say, and not very desirably stacked like armor. I think this might be a dead unique for now. We'll see. We'll see what happens, but it's okay if you played those Sentinel classes because there's other options now for getting mana. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Okay, Urzel's Pride nerf, massive ward retention nerf. Yeah, this one's another huge change. Ward retention has 50% reduced effect compared to 0.7.7. This is so far being very strongly felt by players. That ward retention seems to be a real game changer. So building up lots of ward is no longer as easy as it used to be. Big effects. Ward may no longer be the king at the top of the arena. Along with that, we'll talk about it in a minute, but there's been a huge change to Flame Ward. And so those two things together have made really big differences in the way that, let's say, the meta is going, or the meta seems like it might be going in the first 24 hours or so, with Ward and with other builds. Okay, let's see. Massive Ward nerf. Buffs to Bone Golem. Let's go here. Skills balance. Buffs to Bone Golem, Disintegrate, Meteor, and Vengeance. So Bone Golem got a lot of stuff to make it a lot more tanky. This one in particular is very interesting. Fragments of the Fallen grants 2,000 armor and protections from 200. That's crazy. This is actually supposed to only have 1 point allocated, but I saw last night it still had 4. Should be only 2,000. Anyway, that's a big difference. Disintegrate got a bunch of stuff. It just got a bunch of damage buffs. They're really trying to get it up there. And the changes to channeling might be beneficial for Disintegrate in ways that they weren't for Warpath. So this might be a good change for Disintegrate. Meteor got another bunch of buffs. Where is it here? Oops. I don't want to cover Flame Ward quite yet. There it is. There's just a bunch of stuff in here. Lots of things. Most of the stuff is positive. There's a couple of things that are not necessarily. But Meteor in general looks like it got a lot stronger, especially with the increased added damage scaling by 67%. Like, that's huge. That's a ton. So that should be significantly strong. We'll see if it's good enough. But also, interestingly, Vengeance got buffed. Vengeance was doing quite well last patch, especially on the damage reduction side. They got more. Went from reposting a hit, now reducing its damage by 40%. Or from 30% to 40%. So that's like a 25% more damage reduction, 25% increase in it, I should say. That's a lot. That's a lot, especially since there's also another 36% damage reduction you can get in the passive tree. So that's what, I don't think it adds this way, but it's like 76% total. That's massive. So yeah, very, very big buffs for those. Shatter Strike also seems like it got a buff, but it also has a lot of mana cost stuff. Like the mana got a lot more expensive, which can actually help with ward. So we'll have to see on that one, but it got a huge crit multi on it. And so that might make this still remain at the top. It was currently, technically, if you looked at the by arena waves, it was number 2 on the leaderboard, 2 and 3. So it's one of the top 2 skills as of 0.7.7. We'll see how it is 0.7.8. The ward effects on this, or the ward nerfs, are definitely going to affect Shatter Strike, but it might still be really, really strong. And then as far as nerfs go, let's go talk about Flame Ward. So Flame Ward just got... calling it a nerf is not fair. It's a huge change. It's a massive change. This is going to affect every mage build I've ever made. It won't work the same way. So it was the fact that we would just auto cast it and get like basically free ward. Well, they've changed it so much so that they don't want us to want to auto cast it. And it seems like they have managed to be successful at that. It is not very good to autocast anymore. I definitely won't recommend autocasting. It's become much more situational. You won't be able to get nearly as much ward. So you won't be just having this constant flow of great ward, even if you try to build it kind of like it was before, which is not, it's not actually possible to build that way. They got rid of a bunch of nodes. And there's also a bunch of stuff that is trying to convince you to, hey, maybe do like more damage reduction, maybe do mana regen, maybe do more of the stuff with the retaliation. There's definitely something you have to play around with. I'll be playing around with it. I'm sure I'll release build guides that use a new Flame Ward, assuming it's good enough. But basically throw everything out the window that you knew about Flame Ward going into this patch, because it doesn't apply anymore. Flame Ward might not even be good, or it might be great, but just in a different way. We'll just have to continue to test it and see what happens. Okay, moving on. Let's see. We've got... oh, we do have a Soul Feast nerf as well. This one's worth talking about. So Soul Feast now only hits a maximum number of targets. You can increase the maximum number, but it's not going to be anything like it used to be. Soul Feast was being used to get huge amounts of ward, like 40k plus ward on enemies, because higher arena waves you get higher mob density, and you can just hit just a ton of enemies at once. So they have limited how many enemies you can hit, which means they've limited the ward generation on Soulfeast. So this is a positive change. Soulfeast was definitely getting way too much ward. Okay, let's move on to the passive trees. There's not a whole lot to talk about in here, but one in particular is Druid. I'm not a huge Druid player, haven't been, but everything I'm hearing is Druid got huge. It got a huge nerf hammer hit. It just got smashed with a nerf hammer. It had a lot of prots multipliers in it that have been removed. A lot of rework stuff. People are saying Druid's not going to be very good anymore. We don't know, of course. There's just a lot that has changed this patch. All the affixes that have been added, all the gear changes. There's just so many things that have been changed. We don't really know, but it looks like on the face of it, Druid is going to be much weaker. So we'll just have to see how that goes. So we talked about earlier how you couldn't get mana from the unique. I'm forgetting the name of the unique. Urzel's Pride. Well, they have fixed that problem. So let's see if we can find it in here. The Sentinel specifically got a benefit. Here it is. So now Rive, Vengeance, and Smite have a node that grants health and mana when you directly use them. And it's substantial. It's like a lot of both. I think it's like 25 health and 10 mana if you take it all per hit. And you can get Rive and Vengeance and Smite to hit very quickly. So this is going to be the new way, I think, to generate mana when you are playing a Sentinel. And the health generation is nothing to sneeze at either. It's pretty substantial. So this is something to definitely keep your eye on. Another change to the Void Knight in particular that I love is now throwing attacks are affected by the Mastery Tree. This is something that I asked about on a recent podcast on Apprentice's Corner, that it was disheartening to me that I couldn't really play a Void throwing attack build and actually benefit from the Mastery Tree. Now we can. Now we get the echoes on it, so that's pretty cool. Let's see, next up, new animations for Mage. This is like, the Mage got a full overhaul of its animations. Some of them look pretty cool. Definitely recommend checking it out if you like mages. Just check out some of the different animations. There's different ones for one-handers, two-handers. Focus has a really cool animation now where he like twirls his staff in place. A lot of cool stuff. Definitely worth a check. Okay, Shrines got a increase in duration by 50%, and also if you've seen some of these gold shrines on the ground, they're underwhelming to say the least. They've got significantly more gold. I did get one last night. It still wasn't amazing, but it was definitely more. So that's a nice change, especially now that we have a lot more gold sync, especially with the stash tabs. Like, the stash tabs are very expensive. Good to see that we're gonna get a little bit more gold from the shrines. All right, we're almost at the end. Let's see, we have 4 more things to talk about. All right, so enemies, we've got a, let's see, it's actually a nerf to rares that are tanky, so they're not going to be as tanky in later levels. So there's some math here. Just know they're not going to be nearly as tanky as they were. They're still going to be tanky because they're inherently tanky, but they're not going to scale as badly as they used to. They used to scale really badly. Along with that, Beetle Queens and Rime Giants got nerfed. Beetle Queens they now turn more slowly. This was very annoying. They would just track you, and it was very hard to avoid their attacks. They stopped turning earlier when using their slam, and their slam deals less damage. So the slam is not as scary as it was, not nearly as scary. Rime Giants also turn less while using their abilities. This was super annoying. They would just like turn with you and put their abilities off, and sometimes it was nearly impossible to avoid one of the avalanche hits, depending on where they cast it. No longer a problem. Along with those nerfs, we got some buffs, particularly to the Immortal Eyes and the Watchers. The Immortal Eyes are definitely tankier. I've experienced that in the story. They're much more. They take longer to kill, I'd say. They take a bit longer, and you got to watch out a little bit more for the explosion. It can definitely go off now. And Wengari Patriarchs, it's on here somewhere, there it is, no longer run across the map. If you've experienced these guys, they'll sometimes go to buff their compatriots, and they'll go a long way to do so. And you might have to chase them halfway across the map just to reach them. No longer going to do that. Their pursuit range is much lower. So that's a pretty substantial improvement there. Okay, last thing. I don't even know where it is on here. Somewhere on here. I think it's under bug fixes. Yeah, here it is. Fixed a crash specific to using Lightning Blast and some other lightning skills. A lot of you have experienced this one, if not everyone. The Lightning Blast was crashing the game pretty consistently. That is fixed. Unfortunately, if you're one of the few people like me who's been experiencing a more global crash, that is not yet fixed. So you are probably going to still experience it. In my own experience, I was experiencing it way more yesterday. Almost once every 10 minutes or so at one point, I was crashing. It was super frustrating. I ended up actually switching out graphics cards. I had a 5700 XT in there. I switched out to a much weaker card, an RX 480, and my crashes have gone away. Unfortunately, my frames are much lower as well, but at least I can play the game stably. I know that's not really an option for a lot of people. They don't have just an extra graphics card hanging around anywhere. So just bear in mind that if you've had global crashes, not just lightning blast or lightning related crashes, you are probably still going to have them. But if you had only the lightning blast or lightning crashes, you should be good to go. All right, that will cover all the major things in my opinion. There's just, like I said, there's a lot in here. Some of these things are going to affect certain players more than others. Definitely give it a look around for things that are specific to what you want to do. There's just so much has changed in this patch, so I can't possibly cover it all without giving it an hour or two, and that just seems a little crazy. We're already at 20 minutes, so I'm gonna end it there. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I stream on Twitch 5 to 7 days a week. I won't have the thing on the screen here, but I'll put it in the comment section. Same thing with Discord. Come and hang out and chat there as well. Thank you so much for watching. Enjoy the new patch. Like I said, it is massive. There's a lot to do. There's just a lot to do. I'm going to be streaming 8 hours a day probably for several days here at least, until we go down to a more normal streaming schedule. So I will see you on Twitch. I will see you in YouTube comments and on Discord. Have a great rest of your day and enjoy your time in LE.